Dennis Collins never needed a camera to build his real legacy. Television gave him a face and a following, but the collection that actually defines him has never appeared on any screen, never been listed in an auction catalog, and never been photographed for public release. Behind a keypad-secured door in Wiley, Texas, sits a building that rewrites everything the public thought it knew about one of the automotive world's most quietly powerful figures. And the story of what's inside it has been leaking out in pieces for years now. Most people who follow the classic car world recognize Collins through Fast and Loud, the television series where his friendship with Richard Rawlings turned barn finds and high-stakes flips into compulsive viewing for millions of fans. His business, Collins Brothers Jeep, grew into one of the most respected classic Jeep restoration and sales operations in the country, and his instinct for spotting value before anyone else knew a vehicle was on the market built him a reputation that ran well beyond his television audience. He appeared regularly as someone who could fund an outrageous acquisition, close deals others walked away from, and still turn a profit. But that version of Collins was always constructed to be partial. The cameras captured the visible half of his operation, the handshakes, the auction bids, the showroom reveals, and the personality built for an audience, while the other half stayed locked behind climate-controlled doors in a building that most of his own employees have reportedly never been allowed to enter. The private garage carries none of the cosmetic language of a showroom. No placards, no overhead lighting tuned to make paint look its best on camera, no address listed on any platform. Batteries hold steady on trickle chargers, tires rest elevated off the concrete to prevent dry rot, and each vehicle carries documentation that lives in private ledgers rather than any digital registry. Even Richard Rawlings, who has operated alongside Collins for decades within the American collector car world, reportedly hasn't seen everything stored there. When Collins was once asked why he doesn't put the full collection on display, the answer reportedly came without any hesitation. Some things are meant to be kept, not sold. That philosophy extends considerably deeper than it sounds, because the cars Collins keeps aren't simply rare finds from Detroit's manufacturing golden era. Several are VIN number 0001 vehicles, meaning the first unit of a given model to leave the assembly line before any production car reached a dealer floor. In the collector car market, a VIN 001 sits in its own category entirely. Automakers typically reserve these for executives, use them in early press launches, or destroy them outright to prevent public complications down the line. Collins reportedly holds more than one, with at least two confirmed by sources inside his circle, including a 1965 Mustang GT Fastback, carrying a VIN that predates Ford's first public showroom delivery by any measurable accounting. That particular Mustang's ownership trail doesn't surface cleanly in any public registry. Some trace it to a corporate test facility, others to a private estate sale that changed hands only once before reaching Collins. And the people with actual knowledge on the question have stayed quiet across all the years it would have mattered to speak. Collins never auctioned it, never filmed it, and has never publicly acknowledged its existence in any interview or video. Anyone else sitting on a car with that automotive history and that provenance would normally generate significant noise about it, because the collector car market rewards exactly that kind of announcement. Collins generated nothing at all, and that silence is precisely what built his standing among the collectors who operate at the level where these machines actually change hands. VIN number 0001 cars are only one layer of what the building holds. Further inside sit prototype vehicles, manufacturer test mules, and pre-production builds that were scheduled for destruction and somehow never arrived there. A Ford experimental vehicle equipped with active suspension technology that never reached any consumer model reportedly spent time in the garage. A Dodge carrying design elements from a scrapped early 2000s concept car sits under a cover somewhere in that same space. These pieces didn't arrive through auction houses or conventional dealer pipelines. They came through retired engineers, private collection liquidations tied to non-disclosure agreements, and quiet phone calls that happen only between people who've spent decades building trust in the right rooms. Automakers don't love knowing these vehicles circulate outside their control, because prototypes carry unreleased engineering work, abandoned design decisions, and corporate history that brands consistently prefer to keep invisible. Collins keeping them out of public view is very likely the only reason he still has them. Ghost vehicles occupy a different category altogether, and this is where the collection moves into territory that even experienced car collectors struggle to classify properly. These are cars with no DMV record, no registration history, no sales paperwork, and no VIN matching any known public database. One is reportedly an early GM prototype, whose chassis number corresponds to nothing currently on file anywhere, carrying bodywork that blends Corvette lines with Pontiac Banshee styling, and fitted with aerospace-grade aluminum panels, alongside wiring that doesn't correspond to standard GM schematics. Some who've seen it believe it may have served as a government fleet test vehicle, possibly tied to defense contractor development or DARPA research. A blacked-out Mustang with no branding, a wider track, and a nose profile unlike any known production or Shelby variant reportedly sits nearby, and Collins has never publicly acknowledged either one in any format. Holding cars like these legally requires either connections that run unusually deep or a level of sustained discretion that most people with public profiles simply cannot maintain. Collins has managed both simultaneously across decades of real visibility, which is why the high-end collector world treats him less like a television personality and more like a custodian of things the industry meant to erase before they became someone else's property. Some of the most significant pieces in the collection carry names that American cultural history recognizes without any introduction. A Cadillac with title records traced to the Kennedy estate, reportedly used by John F. Kennedy during his years as a senator rather than as president, sits preserved in the garage without ever having been publicly announced or shown. A Porsche 911 linked through California DMV records to Solar Productions, Steve McQueen's production company, occupies another section of the building. A vintage Shelby GT500 with Carroll Shelby's signature etched inside the glove box rests alongside it. Elsewhere in the same space, a custom Cadillac Eldorado with factory pink trim seats traces its ownership chain directly through Graceland, connected to Elvis Presley's last touring years on the road. Collins's reasoning for keeping all of it private reportedly returns to the same core idea every time the question surfaces. Certain cars carry stories that belong to history rather than to spectacle, and putting them on display would diminish what they represent rather than honor it. The military section of the collection introduces a dimension that sits entirely outside traditional automotive collecting. Beneath a military tarp, somewhere in the rear of the building, rests a Jeep prototype that military historians reportedly cannot account for in any known record. It isn't a CJ, isn't a Wrangler, and carries no civilian classification of any kind. The vehicle appears to have been built during the Gulf War era for Special Forces evaluation, carrying military-grade suspension, modular armor attachment points, and an experimental drivetrain some believe runs on a diesel-electric system, with possible connections to DARPA's silent transport research and a short-lived NATO technology sharing program. Collins has never discussed it on camera, never listed it in any inventory that's been seen, and it hasn't surfaced in the background of a single known video. Those who've reportedly seen it in person describe something engineered for an operational context that never made it into public documentation. Sealed rooms beyond the main floor reportedly hold pieces that even Collins's inner circle cannot access. One of those rooms contains a one-of-one Mopar prototype built around experimental Chrysler drivetrain technology developed in the years before the 2008 financial crisis, featuring an aluminum block, composite body panels, and digital instrumentation years ahead of anything reaching consumers at that time. Collins allegedly made a direct promise to the vehicle's original designer to never exploit it publicly, and every indication suggests that promise has held. Another car in those back rooms, one that close associates say Collins won't discuss even privately, may be a former law enforcement vehicle carrying unreleased surveillance technology, or alternatively, a prototype sports car tied to an automaker that no longer exists in any form. The number of people who know with certainty is reportedly 1. What Dennis Collins built across those decades isn't a car collection in any conventional sense of automobile history. It's a private archive of the automotive world's most sensitive corners, built around the cars manufacturers wanted destroyed. The VIN 0001 firsts, never meant to leave corporate custody. The prototypes that exposed engineering decisions no company wanted scrutinized, and the machines that happened to carry the fingerprints of the people American popular culture decided to remember. Fast and Loud gave him recognition on a national scale. Collins Brothers Jeep gave him a business with real staying power. But this garage, sealed and unmarked in Wiley, Texas, is the version of Dennis Collins that television never reached. Built not for applause and not for views, but for permanence. And it is the version that will outlast everything else he ever built.